detailed, spacious, expensive. These are words synonymous with the electrostatic experience. And today, we're comparing two of the most ethereal, detailed, spacious, and expensive electrostatic headphones the world has ever produced.
And then I'm selling one of them.
Director's Garage.
Ooh, you all know I love a good shootout, and today will be a title fight, and an epic one. It's electric. Okay, whatever. You've got the reigning electrostatic champ, the STAX SR-X9000, the fastest headphone this side of the HE1, taking on the challenger, the Audeze CRBN 2. It's McLaren versus Ferrari. It's Piaget versus Philippe. It's Glad versus Hefty. And you'll need an extra large lawn and leaf bag for this episode. It's going to be a long one.
Resident Idiot.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Director's Garage. It's been a minute. Now, I am your host and resident idiot, Michael, and today, folks, I have an uber high-end shootout between two of the most expensive consumer headphones your money can buy, both clocking at around $6,000, and that's a lot of clocks. And to compare these two, I have one of the best E-Stat amps your money can buy, the Ray Samuels B21 Raider, and the DCS Lena stack for the DAC. All told, it's around $30,000 in gear. We're so into that rarefied air, I may need oxygen for this one. And I'm going to make this one interesting. I'm literally putting my money where my mouth is. Whichever of these two headphones loses, I'll sell it. Yeah, the stakes are high in this one, but let's get one mystery out of the way early, because I know y'all are wondering, what's with that shirt and where can I get one? Well, I'm glad you asked. Shameless, isn't it?
Please.
Because the Director's Garage merch store is finally live, folks. And this tasteful headphone logo adorns, yeah, there's a word for you, adorns a full range of hats, t-shirts, hoodies, even water bottles, folks. And wait for it, golf balls.
Get out.
Along with the phrase, music is life, folks. I decided that if I'm going to do a merch line, it's got to be stuff that I'd like to wear and use myself. So the tees are cotton. There's a thick version. There's a thinner version like this one with a wider neck for summer days. I'm very, very particular. I don't yet have a polo for sale yet because I haven't quite found the right quality, but I got a feeling it's coming soon, folks. Stay tuned. I won't sell you something that will fall apart after a few washes or feels less than supremely comfortable. You can check all this stuff out at directorsgarage.com. This has been years in the making. I'm really, really proud of this merch line. I hope you love this stuff as much as I do. All right, back to the show. Let's dig a little more into that amp for a second, because I think it's worth a closer look.
It's about power.
I am one lucky son of a gun to have the Ray Samuels B21 Raider here to carry out this review. It allowed me to quickly hot swap between these two headphones and revisit sections of songs without losing any ear memory, because this thing has two E-Stat taps on it. These headphones are fairly close in loudness. The STAX is a little bit less efficient, but having this ability to hot swap between these two headphones made doing the review a joy. Now, I want to state, because it does impact the sonic impressions of these headphones, Ray has installed lower powered capacitors on my version of this amp to give the amp a more airy sound. And I want to state that the stock B21 comes with a more powerful set of capacitors, which Ray says sacrifices a bit of that air for bass performance and impact. But I specifically turned to E-Stats for that airiness, which is why I requested that change.
Check out the Ergonomics.
We're going to kick this shootout off with Ergonomics as usual, folks, because fit, form, and comfort on $6,000 headphones is as important as cream cheese on a bagel or whipped cream on pumpkin pie. Is it lunchtime yet? Anyway, the Ergos are going to be kind of a split decision. I don't know, guys. But the STAX does feel lighter. The Carbon, though, has these lush, comfortable pads. You kind of want to take a nap in them at some point. And the fit and the finish on this Carbon 2 feels uncompromised and premium, worthy of a headphone near the top of the price range. Lots of metal and carbon fiber and leather, and now rose gold kind of blings up this experience. Though in truth, I kind of preferred the look of the old silver one, maybe a bit more. Call me crazy, but with the STAX, everything's kind of flexy and springy, and then they got this raised grill deal going on here, which is an homage to past STAX headphones, but the Allen screws around it just look unfinished, and they present this uncharacteristic rugged thing going on. Then you got this brace plate up top, which is completely tacked in to dampen resonance in the band, and the adjustment mechanism is still cheap plastic, and it slides easily. I really wish they would address this. Expensive headphones should feel premium at all of the touch points. But the STAX does score a big blow, or at least a solid slap, for these removable cables. And you get 2 length options included with STAX. That's a nice touch. Even if it is kind of this take it or leave it ribbon deal, at least you can go long or short depending on your setup. Now, the Carbon 2 cable, well, it's fixed, guys, and it's super long, man. I'm telling you. Yeah, I'd really love removable cable in future releases. I know I am not the only person to ever tell Audeze this, but I do want to loop back to these pads for a second, because although they're comfortable, the clamp pressure on this headphone is quite high on the Carbon 2, which ends up making the STAX overall feel a little more comfortable. And the final thing that's going to tip the scale to the STAX is heat, because the Carbon 2 is flat out toasty over time. It would be great if you're listening in a cold room, but if you're not, it's going to heat up your ears. So I'm giving this round to the STAX. For me, the lighter clamp pressure, cooler temps, and removable cables outdistances the Audeze's better build, fit, finish, and yeah, looks. They're pretty. Now, you know I'm not going to be able to resist a chance at a flatulence joke, but both of these headphones have made significant progress practically eliminating farting from the drivers. What am I going to do for the STAX SR-10000? Well, this STAX has nearly no farting at all anymore, which is actually a short between the diaphragm and the stator, and it presents a jarring zap when it happens. The Carbon 2 will still do it if you press rapidly on the cups, but when it happens, it's much quieter than the original Carbon, which would actually make you jump a little when it happened, like a frightened monkey. All right, this show is silly already, but I was always bracing for impact anytime I put the headphone on, or if I even did a slight adjustment, you'd get this jarring pop. Man, I was just a little on edge, but in any event, silent farts, in this case, are a good thing. Now, let's face it, the Ergos aren't going to decide this fight. It's going to come down to sound that's going to push me to one of the headphones over the other. So let's jump into sound properties and start with sound stage. And the SR-X9000, it's just mountain high and a mile wide. Diana Ross would approve. That's the first thing I noticed when I flip between the Carbon 2 and the STAX. Everything just opens up when you go to the STAX. The stage extends as far as any headphone I've ever heard. And yeah, that includes the HE1. It's what you would expect from an electrostatic headphone. And these are as electrostatic-y as you can get. Not a word, whatever. But the stage on the Carbon, well, it's not exactly disappointing. It's just not the STAX. Everything about the Carbon is decidedly closer. They even sound a bit more like a conventional open back, kind of like the ZMF Caldera, whereas the STAX, it's going to get as wide as you can possibly get. It's the Grand Canyon of headphones, whatever that means. But yeah, easy win.
What's
What's the location? Tell me about the image.
Now, both of these headphones do an amazing job of placing instruments around a stage and locking them into place with extraordinary precision. It's a close category, I gotta say, and I really had to run through a lot of music before a winner emerged. Now, one of my favorite tracks that tipped the scales was this spectacular Charles Mingus album called Mingus on Columbia from 1959. Placement of Mingus's bass and Horace Parland's piano are offset with such precision. In the mix, particularly on the Stax, man, you're in the room. It's an amazing effect. On the Carbon 2, it was just a little more straight right-left between the piano and the bass. It didn't quite have that specific placement the Stax had. I also checked out a little bit of rock and Rush's Tom Sawyer. Those drum rolls, guys, they're everything for an image, and they impressed on both of these headphones. They were great and focused on each. I just think the Stax, though it's a soundstage first headphone, it's a little more precise with its instrument placement. This wasn't as dramatic a difference as the soundstage, but I did give the X9000 an edge in imaging too.
I feel the need, yes, I got the need for the speed of sound.
Speed. I'm talking about the responsiveness of the driver to notes and hits. Plucks of strings. Cowbell hits. More cowbell. Well, the smoothness and the decay of reverb. The Stax is one of the fastest headphones I've ever heard. Maybe the fastest, and I heard nothing in this shootout that challenged its dominance. The Stax is just a wicked fast headphone, whereas the Carbon is just a fast headphone. You can't listen to this thing and call it slow, but the Stax is just crisper on everything I heard. I just pick up way more micro detail, nuance, all of those slight noises and ticks during the recording, the bleeding edges of notes. The Stax is pure precision. So far the Stax is really kind of building up a lead here, but there is a category that's going to pull this Carbon back into this fight. Yeah, dynamics, folks, that impact factor, the quiet to loud thing, the force of big moments. And here's where I really appreciated what Audeze was able to achieve with its SLAM system, this ring right here. I've made fun of that acronym enough, but it is really impressive, and it outclassed the Stax by a fairly wide margin. The Stax is more even, always detailed, always refined, and the Carbon could move you with these big moments in a way that the Stax simply can't. It gives the Carbon 2 more of a musicality to the headphone, and in their own way, the Carbon 2 is a bit more fun. The Stax is busy putting the digital bits under a microscope and wringing out every last morsel of data, whereas the Carbon is just bringing the tunes. They each have a different approach, and each is alluring in its own way. But dynamics, yeah, this is going to be a huge win for the Carbon 2. Realism, that ability for the headphone to make you feel like you're in the room with an instrument. With all its hyper detail and speed, yeah, the Stax really takes this one. With your eyes closed, you would swear that the violin is right there. You know, the Sesfara is about the only other headphone I think that pulls off this effect. A piano is a piano, a horn is a horn. Where the Sesfara impresses is the ability to give you these lower frequencies, so a low C on a piano really sounds like it's right there next to you, whereas the Stax, it gets a little bit thin down low. But either way, the Stax is going to take this category easily over the Audeze. I think it's important to note that, like the ZMF Atrium, one of the things I experienced while using this Carbon 2 is what I referred to as musicality. Now, that's really vague, so let me try and explain it. I first heard the Carbon 2 at Can Jam 2024. Not the best of environments to hear this headphone, and the amp I heard it through was a little lacking. But the second time I auditioned the Carbon was at the Audeze factory down in Irvine. I went there with a number of the Patreon folks, and every one of us walked away impressed. Of everything that Audeze gave us to listen to that day, this headphone was the clear winner. It just did everything so well. And it makes me think of the SR-009S, which is the predecessor to the SR-X9000. That was a headphone that excelled at doing the opposite, breaking the music down into elements, often at the sacrifice of musicality. Now, to a degree, the YZ5000 from Yamaha kind of does the same thing. It's really cool to hear all the parts, but putting it all together into a masterful blend is where I think immersion into the music begins. And the ZMF Atrium pulls that off perhaps better than any other dynamic driver headphone I've heard. You just sink into the music with the Atrium, and I think that's the draw to this Audeze Carbon 2. Now, the STAX does do this better than the 009S, but there is still a little bit of that technical superiority over flowing music. So I think what I'm trying to say is, although the STAX keeps racking up these huge technical wins, there's more of a cohesiveness to the sound of the Carbon 2 that gives it its own allure. So each of these headphones that cost the price of a nice Honda motorbike offers something attractive to lure thousands of dollars from the safety of your own bank account. But it's time to break down that sound. We're going to be talking about bass and treble and mids. Yeah, we're talking about sound structure. And nope, we ain't doing it in that order. And we're going to start with the bass, because the bass is kind of a trickier category, guys. The Carbon 2 has greater bass quantity, and you might expect that with this unique slam system, which I think Audeze is going to trickle down into all of their other headphones coming, I think, anyway. The slam system gives this headphone a bit of a percussive effect that always wows me when I experience it. It's like a bit of physicality to the bass that you normally don't expect from an E-Stat. And on tracks that really take advantage of that impact, it's truly impressive. But the STAX has a tighter, more defined and textured bass. And though it doesn't appear to dig as deep as the Carbon nor deliver that punch, I actually kind of prefer it. The Carbon's bass comes across less focused. I wouldn't describe it as muddy or bloated, but I would say it's muddier than the STAX. It's nice to hear this kind of bass presence coming from an E-Stat headphone, and admittedly the bass digs deeper into the sub than the STAX, but in comparison, the tighter, more textured bass is going to win the day here, at least to my ears.
Magical mids.
All right, let's move on to the mids. And the Carbon 2 sounds a bit more mid-forward to me. There's more presence to the mids, and it maybe robs this headphone of some of its natural tonality or realism. Nothing is peaky on the Carbon 2, and it doesn't bite at all. It's not a brightness or anything, but I hear vocals pop more on the Audeze than on the STAX, which has a more balanced presentation throughout the frequency range. If you listen to a lot of vocal music, Sinatra, jazz singers, this may fall into your wheelhouse. But for me, I preferred the more balanced approach of the STAX. And that, of course, leaves treble. And here's where the STAX is really going to jump ahead. All of that speed translates to sparkle, and not in an obnoxious way. It's just beautiful and a wonder. Cymbal rides, transients, all the little detail just dances through the stage in the most precise way. But more than that, there's just air all around transients. Everything floats, and who doesn't like to float? This is not to say there's a lack of treble quality on the Carbon 2. The treble has a bit more heft to it on the Audeze, but it just misses some of that delight and wonder of the STAX. I'm going to open up the music section with the Beach Boys and Brian Wilson. God, what a legend. And I'm going to be using Pet Sounds, and the track I'm going to focus on is God Only Knows. Everybody's been listening to that track a lot lately, but I'm choosing this track because of the crazy instrumentation. It's got 3 basses, 2 electric basses, and a double bass. There's a clarinet, a sax, an accordion. These are all instruments that perfectly match the abilities of electrostatic headphones. The spatial presentation in the stereo remix is just heavenly. Voices float in and out of the track while Hal Blaine hammers out these staccato snare fills. The solid bass on the Carbon brings a bit more emotion and impact to the song, but the ethereal soundstage and spatial presentation of all the instruments makes this an easy choice for the SR-X9000. In fact, the only track on Pet Sounds where I preferred the Carbon to was Wouldn't It Be Nice, which has got a more of a wall of sound theme happening to it than the rest of the album. I thought the fuller presentation of that song was better suited to the Carbon too. I'm going to do something a little bit ridiculous because I got on this bit of a Van Halen kick the last few weeks. I found this remastered US Festival performance on YouTube, and it captivated my attention to see Eddie's playing in his prime, as well as Diamond Dave as the VH frontman, as God intended. Not that I would recommend an E-Stat for an onslaught of heavy guitars and masterful solos accented by David Lee screaming out all over the place. There are better headphones for the hard rock genre, but it was a fun exercise, and here's a case where between the two headphones I would take the Carbon. The analytical X9000 didn't lend itself to the party of women and children first. It split the stage apart too wide, and you could hear gaps in the mix. Even on the 2015 remasters, it actually sounded a bit weak and thin. The Carbon was more of a cohesive presentation, displaying the force of the band and Michael Anthony's solid bass lines, and I preferred it to the Stax, though reiterating, there are better headphone choices if you're looking to rock out with Eddie. But let's face it, when you grab an E-Stat, we're going to be checking out music with a lot more nuance and finesse. Classical, jazz, easy listening, vocalists. So I'm listening to Van Halen's Women and Children first, and I get to the acoustic song on the album. It's called Could This Be Magic? And in the background, I swear I hear a female vocal. I'm like, who dat? Valerie Bertinelli, maybe? But I look up the credits, and it turns out it's this singer, Nicolette Larson. Turns out Nicolette had a huge MOR hit in 1978 with a song called Lotta Love, penned by Neil Young. In fact, she sang backup most of her career with Neil and Linda Ronstadt, who returns the favor here singing backup. What a lovely voice. So check out her album Nicolette if you ever get the chance. It's produced by Ted Templeton, who coincidentally produced Van Halen. The album has this Doobie Brothers vibes, and she actually turns out sang backup on the Doobies' Minute by Minute record. I keep telling you guys, all this stuff connects. You just have to look for the threads to pull. She's a tremendous talent. I was thrilled to have stumbled across this soft rock gem. Nicolette passed in 1997 at the age of 45. Now back on topic, going to a sweet vocalist, you hear the contrast between the Carbon 2 and the X9000. The Carbon gave me a straightforward presentation. Moving to the Stax was like engaging a stereo expander. Everything just opened up spatially. I found the sound engaging and wonderful. Even on harder tracks like Can't Get Away From You, the X9000 was an easy win here. All right, let's get down to some brass tacks here, guys, because E-Stats excel at acoustic instruments. No mystery there, right? They are able to reproduce the timbre and the tone of strings vibrating over wood, air flowing through tubes, reeds vibrating together with greater detail than other types of headphone drivers, which to me translates to outstanding performance in the genres of jazz and classical, where the room and the instruments come to life along with the music. And of these two headphones, when it comes to jazz, Dexter Gordon, Miles Davis, John Coltrane, Thelonious Monk, Art Blakey, and classical from grand symphonies to intimate quartets, the Stax brings these music genres to life in a unique and immersive way. Now, while the Carbon 2 represents these genres very well, the Stax just has this extra life to them, and it pushes this headphone ahead.
Conclude conclusion.
So as you might guess, the Stax won a ton of these face-offs. What I will say about the Carbon 2 is that it presents a more cohesive sound. Everything feels more pulled together and tighter, like a burrito. And in some ways that makes the Carbon 2 more fun. I appreciate the dynamics that the Carbon 2 produces, and it's alluring. There's nothing wrong with enjoying a headphone, and this is undoubtedly a top-tier experience. But overall, the speed, the soundstage, the resolving power, the imaging, the Stax simply outclassed the Audeze in this shootout.
Wrap this damn show up.
One last thought that came to me late in this review. With the Carbon 2, Audeze has given us an electrostatic headphone with a more dynamic driver sound. I see this as moving the bar in the electrostatic world. But if I'm dropping this kind of money for an electrostatic headphone, personally, I kind of want that electrostatic sound. If there's room in your collection for both, they cover a lot of ground between these two headphones. But sadly, I don't have unlimited funds. So in this case, the Carbon 2 is getting sold.
Like and subscribe to the director's garage. It don't cost nothing.
God, it's been so long. Did you enjoy the shootout? Now, I'd ask you to consider subscribing to the Director's Garage so I can keep this train rolling. Give this episode a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, or you can do the other thing if I annoyed the hell out of you. Check out my Patreon if you're interested in connecting with other headphone enthusiasts. We hold a monthly private Zoom call where industry leaders from Hi-Fi Men, ZMF, Modhouse, and many, many others have dropped by to talk about their current and upcoming products. You're looking at a list of the current members, in fact, so thanks so much to those guys, and thank you for stopping by today. I will see you before you know it.
Lord, help me. Help me find my way. Oh, to the director's garage.